And yes, a whole lot to talk about concerning that, a nasty development. We're looking at the implications for Nigeria, Africa, and ultimately global security, because every day we keep getting updates. Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, not backing down, and Ukraine is calling for help. Yes, but to talk more about that is we have a political scientist in the studio talking about Mr. Okunle Halaye. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Moses, once again, and good morning.
Good morning.
And I say good morning to viewers at home. And short to be here once again.
Okay, shortly, a legal practitioner, Premier Latinwo, will also be joining us from Lagos via Zoom.
All right, Doctor. Let's begin from the current situation.
That's right.
It's no news anymore now that Russia has invaded Ukraine. Now, the question at the lips of everybody is, what exactly does Russia want?
That's a very germane question, very, very germane question. But I must be honest with you. When you continue to ask the same questions, it becomes rhetorical.
Okay. How?
Right. Okay, interesting. You see, people need to understand one thing. And I want us to be very objective when we are taking judgment or when we want to assess the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine. By historic antecedents, Ukraine was part of Russian Empire in 1793. That was after the partition when Poland went on the other side. Ukraine was part of Russia. In international relations, basically, when you talk of relationship between two or more countries, it's all about national interests.
Okay.
It's all about national interests. It's all about power play.
Okay.
Ukraine was part of Russia.
Okay.
Russia groomed Ukraine.
Okay.
Russia had invested so much in Ukraine.
Okay.
Ukraine was loyal to Russia.
Okay.
Most part of the things about Russia, about Ukraine, were being taken care of, were being controlled by Russia. Now, by 1991, to be precise, Ukraine felt that, okay, I've had enough, I'm now, matured enough to be on my own. Now went on its way. What Russia is doing at the moment, could be taken up by any average country of the world. And that is why I was so much, I was frowned at the hypocrisy going on between or among some superpower nations. Russia said, Ukraine, you are part of Russia.
Okay.
We've been having things together all this while.
Yeah.
You are now liberated. You are now an independent nation on your own.
Yeah.
If you must form allies, if you must have friends, should it be my sworn enemy?
Okay.
Should it be people who have seen me as bad person? You see, let's be practical.
Are you not bad?
That's why I started by saying let's be objective.
Okay.
Russia is also, when I say a man now, I'm referring to the government ruling.
Yeah.
Russia is more or less like a human being. I'm talking of the people ruling now.
Okay.
And like I did say earlier, what Russia is doing now, United States has done more than this.
No. Okay, now
I'm coming. I'm still coming to that. Now, you ask, I'm just giving a kind of background to this.
Yeah.
So, if Russia says, this is what I want Ukraine to do, don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
Russia is not saying Ukraine should not go on its own. Russia is not invading into Ukraine's sovereignty. But all what Russia says, or what Russia is saying, is if you must be on your own, don't make conspirator connivance against me. Do not pitch your tents against me. Joining NATO is more or less like a threat to Russia.
Okay. Let me take on, Doctor, before because are you now saying, okay, Russia is justified? Because I know there are two sides to this debate. There are two sides to this crisis. That some feel Russia, is justified to do. But you also remember that since the disintegration of the Soviet Union,
that's right,
all those countries are taking on an independent nature. And once you are independent, once you are a sovereign, independent nation,
that's right,
there are some basic rights, that features
that must qualify you as a sovereign. Mind you, there's a difference between independent and sovereign nation.
Okay.
Nigeria was an independent country as of 1960. Nigeria was never a sovereign nation.
Okay.
Until 1st of October 1963.
Yeah.
So will you not say that as of 1960, when Nigeria became an independent nation, Nigeria wanted to do things on its own without receiving directives from the Queen of England? The Privy Council was still being the judicial body was still being controlled by the Queen of England. Even the so-called Nigerian who was given as a Governor General was nominated by the British government. He was accountable to the British government, not Nigerians. And that is an independent nation. Not until 1st of October 1963. So what are you talking about?
Until Nigeria became a republic.
Fully republican nation.
I understand.
Yeah.
But now, when you go with the ethics of the international law, the rules of engagement.
That's right.
You want to
again, I will take you up on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interject.
Okay.
Is there any international law according to the Charter of the United Nations?
Okay.
According to the Charter of the United Nations, international law is the body of law made by the nation state, for the nation state, and to govern the activities of the nation state. What is prominent in that definition? Nation state. The body of law that is made by the nation state, for the nation state, and to govern the activities of the nation state. If that is the conceptual meaning of international law, why as United States be the predominant member of United Nations? Why as United States take charge and take control of United States?
Oh, Doctor.
Okay.
Let's
as we continue, I think the second guest, Kwemi Olatinwo, has now joined us via Zoom. He's a social commentator and legal practitioner. Good morning, Kwemi. Can you hear us? We will try to secure a perfect connection with him. But now, Mr. Kule. Okay. Good morning, Kwemi. Hello? Well, Mr. Kunyala, I mean, is there any justification? I will take you back to that question, that Russian invasion, because almost the rest of the world is condemning that particular invasion. Even China has not really taken any position, but they have also, China has not supported.
Very diplomatic.
Yes, China has not supported Russia. Now, let's look at the global security.
Okay.
I think nations are being careful. They don't want to be, because of the nuclear confrontation that this could bring. And Putin is saying, if you push me to the wall, he has nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So looking at that, it's looking like the
I know where you're going. Let's look at it from this angle. When this crisis started about 2 or 3 weeks ago, to be precise, like I wrote somewhere, I was saying something, I said, what Russia came up to do was more of what we call deterrence, nuclear deterrence in international relations, not conventional war. Remember, Putin said it. Putin said this is not for war, but for peacekeeping. Hold on, sir. I know where you're going. Fine. You will not still rule out nuclear deterrence as a strategy to maintain peace in international relations. When we talk of nuclear deterrence, we are talking about a nation sending a signal of its military prowess to its potential aggressor. You know what I mean? That is that. If you try this, this is what will happen to you. I'm not really coming to fight you, but I need to demonstrate to you that this is what I'm capable of.
I mean, this is not demonstration.
Listen, it is invasion.
It's war.
Listen. What is invasion? What is invasion? Will you now say that because Nigeria needs to defend its national integrity at the Bakassi Peninsula, or Nigeria needs to defend its national integrity at the close border to Benin Republic, it's called an invasion? Don't forget the fact that there are still some controversial lands.
Okay.
There are still controversy about some lands in Ukraine who were presumed to be part of Russia. Russia, look, there is a difference between a country migrating from a particular country to come and colonize a nation, with a country being part of a particular nation and chose to move out of that country. I will cite an example. Nigeria was once a colony of Britain. Britain came all the way from Europe, the European continent, to African continent, in West Africa, Nigeria, to colonize. It is different from Nigeria being part of South London, or Nigeria being part of Wales. Now, we need to get it clear here. What I am saying is that if a nation, if a country has come from somewhere to colonize, is different from a particular country being part of that particular territory and later moved out.
Now,
hold on, I have not answered the question. This is just a prayer. I have not answered your question. Okay. You are asking that Russia has not been mindful of the global, global security implication. And I told you that initially, look, they pushed Russia to this. I will push Russia, not Ukraine. Okay. The hypocrisy of NATO and other G7 push Russia to this. Okay. You will not expect Russia, you will not expect a country who is in a fix to just fold. It would be so stupid of Russia to fold its hands and be watching war to come and meet it in its doorstep.
But diplomacy,
it needs to react and, like Boy Scouts motto, be prepared.
But Mr. Koyale, to be prepared. Diplomacy could have solved this.
What diplomacy? What else do you call diplomacy?
Do you think Russia gave much room for diplomacy?
Good. Prior to this, Russia, look, Zelensky is playing into gallery. And I kept telling people, two elephants are fighting. The grass will suffer. All those noise the G7 are making and the NATO are making. Look, Russia is not just a country. Well, I'm not saying Russia is not a country that NATO can just sanction just like that or harass like that. You understand? As I speak here, about 45% of energy products in Europe are being supplied by Russia. Russia is the biggest exporter of wheat in the whole world, bigger than even the so-called United States. You get what I'm saying? So, to sanction such a country, they will be diplomatic about it. And Russia was not. Why will United States came all the way from North America to come and pitch state with Israel against his neighbor, Iraq, against his neighbor, Saudi Arabia? This is all about national interest. The same thing that they are accusing Russia for is what they are demonstrating.
Okay, now, Doctor, those are two lines of discussion. Those are two lines of discussion which could be germane. But now we are not looking at why America is supporting Israel or why America
we need to look at
it. But Russia invaded Afghanistan and all of that. You know, we are not looking. We are looking at now Russia, Ukraine. The question is, you have tried to bring that in, and the fact that Russia is not a minnow, it's not something that you will just override. Agreed. I even see some pictures on the net where you see Satan too. You see some of these just to tell you that
they're just be sarcastic in a way.
Just to tell you that okay, you guys, if you but the sanctions, that's why they are going for sanctions, and you are feeling okay. But the sanctions, even within the few days that it's working, seems to have, it seems if it is, done well.
You're right. But no man is an island.
Let's now come to, because from your, and I like your view, because this view actually, it's against the run of the mill, because a lot of people are, supporting Ukraine. A lot of people feel. I know if
I'm not against Ukraine either.
But then
Now we have to be objective.
now let's now look at Moses was trying to talk about diplomacy.
Okay.
Now, okay.
I will define diplomacy
Let me just get
by international relations.
You can take it together. Now, Russia knows that Ukraine was part of the USSR before they moved out. Okay, Ukraine was not the only country.
That's right.
There's so many other countries there that moved out, and then you're asking yourself, okay, once they have gotten their independence, and you want an interaction with them, can't you culture them? Can't you culture, because the problem is, from what I read, is that European Union is even inviting Ukraine now, wants Ukraine to be part of European Union. NATO has, put it in view, kind of to be a member of NATO. What olive oil has Putin extended to Ukraine? When you have that, can't you use diplomacy? Can't you culture Ukraine? Why now do you go the way of aggression?
Thank you very much. Diplomacy.
Yeah.
There is a connotative definition of diplomacy, and there is denotative definition of diplomacy.
Okay.
The denotative definition of diplomacy is the way some people have been looking at it, by dictionary meaning. But by expectorate, by profession, by connotative definition of diplomacy, what we call diplomacy in international relations is the ability of a country to be able to explore credible negotiating capacity to drive home its need with another country. That's why I say I will define diplomacy. If that is diplomacy, we will not be talking about Russian invasion of Ukraine. I will still say it, and I will repeat it again. Ukraine played into gallery.
How?
Good. Prior to this crisis, are you aware that Putin had called Ukraine for dialogue or caution Ukraine of going further? When I say caution this time around, by trying to seek support of NATO. Well, by the way, Ukraine is not a member of NATO yet.
No, it's not. Yeah.
But that is, it was well written on the wall, and that was what triggered Russia's action.
Okay.
Because Russia knew that, like you Bible say, your financial relation. Russia knew question that if Ukraine can join NATO successfully, then it's in a fix. The best thing it could do was to curb or prevent it, and that was how it adopted nuclear deterrence. I'm repeating it isn't initial, even at this moment, you cannot still call that a conventional war. It is still
With all the bombings, with all the...
Sir, maybe I'm talking like an expert here.
Okay.
If it's called a war, then you call it third war. It's not a war yet.
Okay.
Of course, technically, that's the war.
Civilians are being attacked. And you say it's not a war. Ukrainians do not see it that way.
You tell people who are migrating over to
global.
say it's not a war.
You won't call. Listen, I know what it's not a conventional war.
Okay.
But it's a war.
You won't compare what
about semantics.
Okay, hold on. You won't compare what is. The crisis is still between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah. Yes, now two nations fighting.
Yeah. As US killed anyone, as Britain killed anyone, all they were still doing all
we are not calling it world war. We are saying there's a war between Russia and Ukraine.
We have to be mindful. I would disagree. We have to be mindful of this language, the polemics war.
Okay.
Are you getting me?
Okay.
There's a difference between conflict and war. Crisis and war. Most especially when we talk about global implication. You understand what I'm saying now? So, yeah, people have just been saying about 3,200 Russian soldiers were killed was it on a Monday? People are not looking at where Russia is losing or losing out. Just yesterday,
but Russia is the aggressor.
Russia is the aggressor,
So-
and Russia will be the aggressor in this situation.
Yeah.
Because Russia is the aggressor, but Ukraine was a potential aggressor to Russia.
But Ukraine is also suffering more losses.
It is
Looking at casualties.
Look, that is the more reason
Because Ukraine is the battleground.
Look, so an man will now go and form allies with an Owerri man to come and fight a Yewa man. Or a Bagura man will go and pitch tents with an Owerri man to come and fight.
When you want to use those analogies, when you want to use those analogies, agreed.
Let's be objective,
No,
please.
we say agreed. USSR, when you still have the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, Ukraine was an integral part of that. Yes, but then the question is, or is it that alliance that was called the USSR? Was it a forced alliance? Because if not, there should still have been some level of relationship.
But it's a defunct thing now.
No, I know. What I'm saying is because you went back into history. You took us down memory lane and all of that. The fact that Russia was part of Ukraine and stuff. Now, the question is, was it just a union of strange bedfellows? Because if not, the alliance, for example, there's a popular this thing, they say,
Yeah.
That is, even though when there is crisis, there's
So why is the Bameji, Ukraine and Russia, Jarawaniyo?
so that means there is a technical problem. That means there's a
And the technical
fundamental
problem, this is it. Look, let me tell you one thing.
Yeah,
And I can say it anyway.
yeah.
The prime cause of this crisis is not more than conspirator connivance. And I must also be honest with you at this point that United States is playing more role in this case.
Okay, well,
NATO is NATO is playing. Okay, you want to
have to hear your
Let's
thoughts.
get another perspective.
It seems Okoyemi Olatinwo, a legal practitioner and social commentator, has joined us. Good morning, Okoyemi. Yes,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, many thanks for joining us. So we're looking at the Russian-Ukraine crisis, implications for Nigeria, Africa, and global security. We're still on global security anyway. So I want to ask you, any justification for that invasion?
Well, thank you, Moses. While I was trying to get the connection on, I had the privilege of listening to the erudition of Mr. Kule, and I must say, I agree totally with his position. Or a conflict. In my opinion, it is a conflict and not an invasion. Why do I say this? He has rightly stated some salient fact that we need to analyze, apart from the media narratives that we've been hearing or saying, but I think we all know better. Now, what is the history of Ukraine and Russia itself? Not until 1991 did Ukraine get its independence from Russia. So, which means that invariably they've been one family from even before the USSR that we talk about now. Now, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is it actually following the mandate it has? Their course for expansion into the territory near Russia, is it valid? Is it a sincere one? These are the questions we need to ask. And did Russia sound any note of warning even before this conflict escalated? So the questions we'll be asking is this an escalation of international political hypocrisy? And is there a de-escalation in view? Now, for me, I might not be able to justify the loss of life that are attached or attributed to this conflict, but it could have been avoided. it could have been avoided by the parties involved. So I'm not entirely justifying the action. Of course, there are always ways to address conflicts, but when it gets to situations like this, like the saying says, desperate situations call for desperate solutions. And see Russia, for example. Now, Russia cannot stand the risk or the ability to allow a NATO military base near its country. And the only way they can do this is to actually show, and what Putin is saying is doing is demilitarization of the NATO forces in Ukraine. And in the bid to do that, he probably will take every means necessary in doing this. Of course, now the narrative we are seeing on the media is loss of life, numbers that are not verified, deaths and everything. But truly, we cannot say essentially what the destruction is in Ukraine. Now, videos that we've seen circulating have been attacked on the public facilities. But yesterday, the president of Ukraine came out to say that he's been attacking civilians and civil bodies. This is essentially to just paint Putin or the conflict in another narrative. Mostly, in my opinion, this is not yet a war, neither is it an invasion. It is a conflict between two brothers.
Okay, conflict between two brothers. But, I mean, can diplomacy still work? Still on Okwemi? I mean, is there an end in sight? What do you foresee?
I didn't get that message.
Can diplomacy stop these conflicts as you want to?
Of course, in my opinion, for it to have been prevented, diplomacy should have been employed. And for it to be abated, diplomacy will certainly be employed. And diplomacy is actually the way out of this unnecessary conflict, unpleasant situation that we are having at the moment. So I'm sure that like Mr. Kule rightly stated, the power breakers that are actually instigating Ukraine in particular would actually have to be sincere in the diplomatic conversation parties will be having. And if you see Russia, for example, Russia just wants it clear, you are not joining my sworn enemy, and you do not have any duty joining my sworn. Now, I understand that we might talk about sovereignty and independence, but if you look at the historical antecedents of both countries, it will be difficult to separate their foreign policies from one another. Now, for example, let's look at it from this perspective. Nigeria is a very large country. Now, we have a very, very risky trap when, for example, God forbid, a real international conflict. We are also surrounded mostly by French-speaking countries who have strong alignment with the French government. Now, if, for example, something happens and the people that have been agitating for separation or sovereignty within the country, for example, goes away from a different country, let's say, for example, Biafra, and God forbid, there comes a time where Biafra is completely doing what is against the foreign policy of Nigeria, alienating himself with the French ideology and so other things, thereby posing a direct risk to us that we share the same boundary in the old Nigeria, for example. You will not be blaming Nigeria if Nigeria responds to that and trying to put its own territorial integrity in check. So for me, I think real and actual diplomacy will be the one to solve this problem in this circumstance. Real and actual diplomacy, Moses, not the political diplomacy. Stop this, stop that. Real and actual diplomacy.
Okay, the Lord, let me take you on this, because when you talk about all of this, which is quite okay, you forget the fact that Ukraine was part of USSR. For Ukraine to have struggled or whatever, to have pulled out during that event in 1991 means that there was a disagreement, you know, that at least if they still had a relationship, Ukraine might still have stayed with Russia. you know. But then Ukraine moved out. So people are saying, okay, Russia is like a man who has a wife, who's divorced the wife has moved away from your house, and then you are now still saying that, you know, she cannot go and marry another man. What's your own take on that? You know, you say because she has a wife for you, she has children for you, the man cannot, the woman cannot go and marry another man. And she has left your house, she's no longer in your house, she's no longer under your custody, but you now say, okay, because of your own personal investment, this woman cannot take her own decisions. Some people are saying that's what Russia is doing to Ukraine. And if Russia wants
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear that? Were you able to hear my questions? Okay,
yes. If I get that correctly, the analogy of a man who divorced his wife and attempted to remarry. Am I correct, sir?
Yeah. So some are saying that Russia and Ukraine were in a relationship.
Yes.
They had married before, and then Ukraine divorced, you know, moved away, and then Russia is now saying Ukraine cannot marry another husband because he feels his children are under threat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, the thing here is, the relationship between Ukraine and Russia before now isn't that of a marriage, in my opinion. Like I said, it is that of of brothers. And if, for example, it wasn't countries of the world that came to form a country initially and separated. Ukraine is Russia. And if you check the breakdown of the ethnicity in Ukraine, for example, we have a significant part of people that are closely linked to Russia. So it is not, in my opinion, it is not a marriage as we want. For example, legally speaking, when there's a divorce, there's a separation, that is the end of the marriage. Yeah. Now, Ukraine is not even attempting to marry NATO. Now, this is international politics at its peak. And now Ukraine is not joining another country, it's not forming another country with a different country. It's joining a particular international organization, a particular foreign bloc, which is contradictory to the policies of that particular region.
Which policy now, of which particular region?
Of course, we understand that
Ukraine is in Eastern Europe. Could be part of European Union. Latvia was part of Russia before. Now Latvia is in what's it called? Latvia is in European Union. There's no problem. Latvia was part of USSR before. It's in Europe. It's in European Union. Ukraine, Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Sir, even if we are not even taking Russia out of Europe.
Okay.
Russia is currently part of the European Union.
Okay.
So also Ukraine is also part of the European Union.
Yeah.
Now we have many countries in Africa that are part of the African Union, but we know that our policies are not the same. Now, when it comes to the sovereignty of Russia in question, putting the territorial integrity of Russia into play, into perfection, it needs to defend itself against any form of external aggression that is building blocks near its borders. Now, a country as powerful as Russia, now for one to be a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, just 5 of them, it goes a long way that you are powerful. And we are not going to deny the fact, we are not going to form oblivion that there's this constant power tussle between the powerful countries of the world. Now, a country like Russia, it will be really unsafe for it to allow its close neighbors who has a very good history as itself or as herself to allow a military base, a strong military base that is not going to be controlled by Russia near its borders. So essentially speaking, it is not as a matter of marriage that we're talking about here. Like Mr. Kule said, this is complete international policy. international diplomacy that should be done with utmost sincerity. We're not going to, like, for example, can Russia or France go near Mexico?
Okay.
Can Russia or France go near Mexico? Now, we are not denying the fact that, fine, on the book, on the textbooks, we will say, okay, fine, there is sovereignty. In Nigeria, we define sovereignty, we do all of these things. But we must agree that there are certain international policies, some that are written and some that are not written. Let me cast you back memory lane, sir. If you remember the Berlin Conference of 1956, some people sat down in Berlin and also later on in London, the London Partitioning Conference, to share Africa. Now, what that connotes is that before now, there has been a consistent separation of the part of the regions, of the geographical locations controlled by these powerful people. Now, that is the strength of the countries of the world, of the powerful countries of the world. Now, essentially, the steps being made, taken by United States of America, NATO, enticing Ukraine, it's only to neutralize the power of Russia as a country.
No.
Okay. Well,
it's only to neutralize the power of Russia as a country.
Okay.
Now, you might not be able to find this on the textbooks because we find sovereignty. You might not get justification for it. But what I'm talking about is the United Nations. Now, I was privileged to be in a discussion like this, and somebody asked, has the United Nations outlived its use? Under the close eyes of United Nations, these conflicts could have been avoided. There is nothing United States or NATO is looking for in Ukraine.
Okay, well, I mean, before I go back to Dr. Kunle-Alaye, but are you not afraid that this could lead to nuclear confrontation? Currently, Putin has already ordered his nuclear forces onto high alert.
Yes. About that, I'm really unhappy that it actually escalates into an unpleasant thing. And that is why somebody like me is canvassing for a quick de-escalation. And the only way this can be de-escalated are for us to put sentiment aside and listen to the recommendations Mr. Kunle has been given. Fine, I think the day before yesterday, about 48 hours ago, delegates from Russia and Ukraine met in Belarus to discuss. Few hours after the meeting, we had the missile drop in, I can't remember, in the second largest. So it means that meeting essentially did not prove anything. Now, according to reports, Russia is enticing some people in the Ukrainian government now. It means that we are not ready to do this sincerely and diplomatically, what diplomacy stands for. The United Nations should call everybody to order, discuss this thing the way it is. Of course, we might continue to admonish sovereignty. I'm scared that it might actually escalate into something unpleasant. But the only way to not escalate, because Moses, let me tell you this for free, I do not see Russia backing down with all of these media noises or without we not changing. So for us to really have peace and sanity that we require and not affect the economy of the world. I caught Mr. Kunle explaining about the economic impact of this on the world. This has not even gotten to full escalation yet. So that is why if anybody is calling it a war, it is not a war yet.
Okay, but
for us to be able to de-escalate it, and my fear can be arrested, Moses, we need actual diplomacy from the United Nations and all of the major actors.
Okay, now to Dr. Kunle-Alaye. He said he doesn't see Russia backing down despite the harsh economic sanctions. Is Russia not alone in this?
How do you mean Russia being alone? God bless Okoyemi.
Well, you on the left hand you find an ally. You find an ally in Okoyemi.
Why not? If allies go God bless Okoyemi. You see, I don't know Okoyemi. We have not had any discussion.
But Russia seems to be alone.
Listen, Russia is not alone.
Maybe except with Belarus.
Russia is. You see that analogy, marriage or whatever, is not only hypocritical but unprofessional.
How?
Right. A situation of this kind is beyond saying one married, a wife divorced. This is very serious. I know the person was just being sarcastic.
No.
You know.
Let's leave. Why I'm not against this analysis, the two of you have brought onto play, which is germane, because we must also, just like Yoruba people would say, you put your fire on your rooftop and you go to sleep. I understand that. You know, but what I'm looking at is the fact that, okay, there is a power play. Definitely, there's a power play, but there's a loophole.
That is it.
You know, there's a loophole that the EU, and NATO are trying to explore.
You see, I got a point. I said it just before we went to opening, that some superpower nations, the G7 and the NATO, are also responsible for the crisis trending in the Eastern Europe.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, it's no more than national interest. This crisis, I will still call it conflict. Okay, let me also say that. No legal practitioner or political scientist will refer to the trending crisis in Eastern Europe as war. It's still a conflict. Right. This particular crisis, as far as I am concerned, will have been avoided.
Okay.
But I tell you, United States will not want this thing settled. Will not want the two countries to live in peace. Because you are my friends, you are my enemy's enemies, you are my friend. You are my friend's enemy, you are my friend. That is just what is being played out here.
But some are
US, sorry sir, US, this is not the first time US is doing this. US did the same thing in Venezuela.
Yeah, that's true.
Between John Guaido and Macedo did the same thing in Egypt. I mean Syria rather. Russia, US was supporting the rebels against Syrian President Al-Assad. Okay, Republic of Ireland used to be part of the United Kingdom. Republic of Ireland is now on its own. As I speak here this morning, Republic of Ireland does or adopts British policy. Everything that happens or every policy of the Republic of Ireland is in line with that of the British policy. And it is called Republic of Ireland. As a matter of fact, there is still a part called North Ireland. Because the United Kingdom is still in four folds. The Wales, the Scotland, the England, and the North Ireland. So, what I am saying in this situation is, the crisis between Ukraine and Russia is more conspiratorial. And those who are causing this crisis, look, the crisis is not even between Ukraine and Russia. They want, like Uncle Emi said, NATO wants to weaken, demilitarize Russia. Want to bring Russia to its knee that what is the problem? And mind you, Russia has always been the only country that challenged US. Is US the only country in the world? Why US, hold on, why US only be the country that control the entire world?
Doctor, back to my question. I mean, is Russia not alone? No, in
Russia, good. Russia is not alone.
Except for the million support
Russia is not
from
alone.
Belarus.
Okay, hold on. Russia is not alone.
China is not
Russia is not alone, technically. And I will explain. You are using the word being alone because the so-called superpower nations and the G7, they are supporting Ukraine against Russia. And meanwhile, Ukraine needs to open its eyes and learn what these people are doing are not in the interest of Ukraine. There is what we call subservience in international economic relations. If Ukraine win this war, Ukraine become perpetually subservient to G7.
The same way.
So, and that is implication. Hold on.
The same way you go to Russia.
Russia, the way US and NATO will relate with Ukraine will be different from the way Russia has not. Okay, why this crisis? Ukraine has gone since 1991. Why now? But have you asked that question? Have you asked that question? You have pulled down since 1991. Okay. What has happened between 1991 till this moment? Why the crisis at the moment?
But no, there has always been interference from Russia. Even in
do you also know?
In the politics
do you also know there will be? Because there are Ukrainians who are allies of Putin.
Okay.
There are people we call separatists, Ukrainian separatists. Okay. They are bona fide citizens of Ukraine. They are against the leadership style of Zelensky. Okay, will you not tell those? You are saying Russia is alone. Some Ukrainians are supporting Russia, and you are telling me Russia is alone. What is the definition of being?
But do you have the number?
What? Leave the numerical strength.
Okay.
Because one person.
Okay, now let's now come to this other, and now we want to take on the barrister there. Okay, we've talked about the fact that is an complete conspiracy. It is everything. What is the global implication of this crisis? Now, let's look at what is the need for Nigeria, what's the need for Africa, and then what does it really mean for the entire world?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah,
we can hear you now.
All right. If this is not de-escalated, it will put many countries of the world in a precarious situation when it comes to security and affect the economy of the world in a negative way. And that is why we must continue to preach the de-escalation of this conflict, and we must abide by the sincere recommendations. However, for countries in Africa and with specific interest in Nigeria, there is a likely benefit for us. I had the privilege of listening to President Akintoye on this, and he said if he were to be the president or in government, he would start trying to see how to get gas shipped to countries of Europe. For some reasons, in a way, this conflict, even though it's really, really bad from all indices, can actually afford countries in Africa and Nigeria the opportunity to grow its economic space with specific reference to exploitation, crude, the gas, and some of our farm produce. So essentially, we actually get certain economic benefits, but at the end of the day, this might actually count for nothing. Someone said recently, what if this escalates to a full-blown war now? Does Africa have the capacity to be a refugee site for citizens of the continent of Europe, or other citizens of other countries of the world? Then the response was, Africa has always been a refugee site for now. So the thing is, if this escalates, it's going to have a very, very, very dark consequence on many countries of the world. And Nigeria, for example, is not going to be exempted from this. However, we can still key in into the economic benefit, the economic shopping window that is open now. For example, you know, Germany gets like 70% of its gas produce from Russia.
That's it. Switzerland.
Okay. We will try to secure a better connection with Okwemi. I mean, Dr. Laye, my question is, what role can Africa play in de-escalating this crisis? We know that Russia has found allies in quite a number of African countries. You know of the BRICS, involving South Africa, and many African countries are being careful about taking sides in all of this.
They have to be very careful. Okay. As a matter of fact, they should remain, like I was reading somewhere, they should remain spectators. Okay. Because we are talking of superpower nations fighting. Okay. And if they are so hasty to be judgmental or take sides, it will bounce back. I read somewhere where the federal government was asking Russia. How I just laughed. I just laughed. How many times mention any African country that Russia colonized? Just mention one.
But Russia had always played.
Can you mention one?
No. What I'm saying is, Russia had always been, playing kind of an intervention. This thing in
to checkmate. Don't be mind with your words. To checkmate the excesses of the United States.
Okay.
Please, sir, don't be euphemistic. Okay. And that is the problem the US is having with Russia. Okay. Russia has always been the country to check the excesses of the United States. No, and that is the problem.
But you know that.
I give example.
But you know that when US, you know when US invaded Afghanistan.
Yes.
When Russia invaded Afghanistan, US also came in.
But what was the end of what was the end to the whole thing? Did US not withdraw its troops eventually?
And what I'm trying to say is that the two of them, actually, when America is here,
they have been sworn enemies. Everyone knows that.
Okay.
And that is why I said Ukraine needs to be very careful and open. They will just use Ukraine and dump.
Okay.
Russia and US, I must be honest with you.
Okay.
Russia is not really fighting Ukraine.
Okay.
Look, physically, Russia, I must be honest with you, Putin will not be happy seeing such crisis going on in Ukraine. But Putin must do this
matter of security,
because the national integrity of Russia must be duly protected. Putin is not fighting Ukraine. Cut me anyway. But physically, if you look at it, you say, they've killed all of them in Ukraine. But Putin is fighting US.
But
Putin has always been fighting US.
But Putin is also defending his own interest.
Leave interest. International relations is all about national interest.
Okay.
US roles or US intervention is all about US national interest.
That's true.
Look, you can't rule out national interest in international relations. Any country, Ukraine that is eager to be part of NATO, is all about national interest.
Okay.
Because Ukraine feels that the moment it has the military base of NATO in Ukraine, the encroachment, the infringement, the control of Russia will be, curbed to a minimal ground. Look, you don't intervene in a matter and be subjective.
Okay.
And that is the role. UK, I was just reading yesterday, they said they were going to SWIFT or something, that they're going to deal with African country. Back to your question. African country. Like you say, everyone, look, sir. Federal government, if I must advise any African country, they should just keep quiet.
You need to see this
this
page on social media that Nigeria was warning Putin, and then they should put one.
No, that is true. That's true. It's a joke, but it makes sense.
It's a joke.
It's a joke, but it makes sense. Because, look, wasn't it just last week that I heard the petroleum something saying that there could be scarcity, and that the scarcity of petrol could persist.
Owing to
the crisis, and that the price of bread, because as I speak here today, Russia is still the biggest exporter of wheat.
Okay, but can Russia...
African countries should be careful. They should remain spectators.
Dr. Lai, can Russia survive the economic sanctions? So Western companies leaving Russia, events are being cancelled, countries are...
Moses, sorry, when I don't allow you to, it's because I know where you are going. Look, I think it's premature to judge or it will be too hasty of us to now say that what become of Russia.
Okay.
It will be too hasty of us to suggest of what will become of Russia after this crisis. Russia you heard what Dr. Emi said. Putin is not going to back down.
Okay.
And that's just the truth.
Okay. And Zelensky won't back down too. Looking at the delegations,
all this noise Zelensky is making, all this noise. Why didn't he make all this noise when Ukraine has always? Why has he always come to Russia for political advice and all that? Why now? Just because NATO and the G7 are supporting it. That's why Zelensky is.
Dr. Lai, look, if Russia, it doesn't look as if Russia will back down.
It doesn't. Russia cannot back down.
Sanctions. Okay. And Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is also not taking into all the demands.
Look, any sanction on Russia will affect Ukraine. Do you agree?
Okay.
Any sanction on Russia will. Ukraine is just like Obada to Itaoshina.
Okay.
Some parts of Ukraine are still part of.
Okay. Now you said African countries.
they have to be very diplomatic and careful on whatever sanctions they're going to make, because it will have a huge global economic and political threat.
Okay. Now you say African countries should not be aligned.
It's an advice.
You know, it's an advice. Yeah, that is, I remember those days we used to talk about non-aligned nations. And some people are saying that when you sit on the fence and you are not definitive, you know, you are the risk of being bombed. You know, somebody said, you know, there was a guy who was sitting on the fence and they were fighting, and then they now say, okay, you, this guy that you are sitting on the fence, they now began to throw bombs on the guy. Is there not a point where we come as an African nation, as the African Union, you know, can they not take definite positions?
I don't think it is advisable for any of African countries at this point to take definite position. They can be diplomatic about it. Okay. The federal government will ask Russia to take off or withdraw its military, whatever, is wrong. Federal government will have said.
No, I don't. I don't think federal government said that. It was just a joke on the social.
No. Through Geoffrey now. Through Geoffrey Oyema.
Okay.
That was last week. Through Geoffrey Oyema.
Okay.
Yeah, he said so. When they were talking about, look, some Nigerians say they are not coming home.
Yes.
Even they
many are coming home.
Is that not a shame on
Nigerian? Many are coming. If some,
you are looking at death like this, you know?
But many are coming.
This particular death is better.
Compare the number of those that are coming home and those that rather stay in Ukraine. I said, but many are coming back.
Who are the many?
Really?
So those ones
thousands are coming back, Dr. Lai.
Those ones that said they rather die there. Are they not Nigerian?
Well, just a few. Well, we have to round off.
What was the statistics of?
You don't have the stats. You don't have the stats also. We have to round off now. Maybe your parting shots for those bringing the fear that okay, this could lead to World War III if both sides, you know, do not find a common ground. Because it may also get to a point when other European countries may also want to support Ukraine, and by the time they are joining forces, and you know, this could just escalate.
Indeed, there is no need for any world war at the moment. Countries are just slipping through the crisis of COVID-19.
Okay.
I really think that dialogue, negotiation can still solve this matter. The two countries, including Putin is willing to enter into, in fact, right from the World War, Putin was not really prepared for war. It was the hypocrisy on the part of the US and other NATO that brought this case to even Ukraine itself was not really ready to fight Russia. Let those who are playing a kind of peacekeeping roles be sincere and honest with what they are doing without being conscious of their national interest. Then the case will be settled.
Okay, many thanks, Dr. Kunle Alaye.
Mr. Kunle Alaye.
Mr. Kunle Alaye. Okay. Well, congratulations in advance. So we're not done yet. We'll be back shortly for another conversation. Quite different, you know, from this crisis. So stay with us.